Hey folks, this is Kelani. I hope you're all excited to finally burn down take part in the awesome events leading up to a tragic accident. Yeah, accident. That sounds pretty likely. The Horde will be marching north soon enough. In the meantime, let's keep our fingers crossed that the servers will remain stable and healthy for the next few weeks and into Battle for Azeroth, while we check out another class and see how everything is shaping up. Next on our list are the priests, whether you favour the light or have surrendered yourself to the void, or even if you fancy dipping your toes into both pools. Let's see where their strengths lie, where they fall short, and ultimately, are they worth playing in Battle for Azeroth? Priests are pretty unique in that they're the only class to have access to two different healing specs, Holy and Discipline. Holy has almost been a stereotype healer. It's definitely one of the first specs I usually think of when healers are being discussed, because it just does everything pretty well. Discipline has changed quite a few times over the years and has settled on a wonderful version of deal damage to heal your allies. I think they finally reached the goal the dev team seems to have set out long ago. And then we have Shadow, which isn't in the greatest of spots right now due to the dev team running out of time before getting around to their expected class changes, but that doesn't mean it's not going to do well. Let's have a look at each spec in greater detail. Let's kick things off with Discipline, because it's changed a little bit and that seems to be where the hype is right now. Disc Priest will still be using Atonement healing, which means a good portion of their healing will come from dealing damage with their various abilities, but the spec has been streamlined just a little bit. Instead of Power Word Shield having a cooldown or applying the Weakened Soul debuff, both of those things have been removed. Power Word Shield can now be spammed on as many players as you see fit, but it's not going to absorb the crazy amount of damage that it used to in the past. We're not suddenly back to Disc Priests stealing everybody's healing because their bubbles were OP, but Power Word Shield will be the main way to apply Atonement to your allies, and Plea has actually been removed. This brings back a lot of the absorption healing flavor that made Disc unique in the past, without changing their entire kit too much. So bubbles to apply Atonement and smite your foes to spread the love and a few heals. It works really well and it's a whole lot of fun to play. Out of all of the healers, I think it's definitely my favourite right now. The playstyle is fluid and you have access to various spells to deal with different situations. You can apply Atonement to your entire party with Power Word Radiance if you need to get everyone up quickly. You can just keep a bubble on the tank and keep Atonement rolling while dishing out some awesome DPS if nothing else is going on, and if push really comes to shove, you have access to some emergency heals with Shadow Mend. And if you really miss the glory days of Disc, you can pop your new Rapture cooldown and see those massive shields once again. It's also on a pretty short cooldown, only 1.5 minutes, so that's going to see a lot of use for sure. It's kind of surprising how much DPS a Disc Priest can kick out if they don't have to use their global cooldowns on healing the party. So much so that I guarantee they're going to see a lot of play in Mythic Plus right from the get-go. But their healing numbers are also really decent. I would be surprised if you didn't find it easy to get into raids as a Disc Priest as well. Being able to switch your focus between dealing more damage or healing more often is really valuable in all sorts of raid encounters, and you bring some pretty fantastic cooldowns to the table. Pain Suppression is one of the best external cooldowns for your tanks, a whopping 40% damage reduction, but you also have Power Word Barrier, a 25% damage reduction for anyone smart enough to take cover within. 25% damage reduction for your entire raid is pretty sweet, but you can also talent your barrier away, and while that might sound like a daft idea, hear me out. Have you ever wanted to apply a bubble on every member of your entire raid with the push of a single button? The Luminous Barrier talent allows you to do just that. It's not a huge bubble, but that's damage that your raid just won't have to suffer through. This could be game-changing on some encounters. I think Discipline Priests are going to be a great choice if you want to try something a little different. They're not quite as easy as some of the other healers, they require a bit more focus and quite a lot of planning, but they're a lot of fun. They're going to be great in dungeons and a fantastic choice for raids. I think they're really going to shine when your groups are very competent. If your party members avoid everything they're supposed to, and interrupt the spells that are supposed to be interrupted, you should be largely free to wail on the mobs while keeping the tank up. If your party isn't very competent and they're standing in all manner of goop and poop, taking constant damage and getting nuked every 10 seconds because no one wants to interrupt that one blasted spell, you might be pretty stressed out on a Discipline Priest. They don't deal with large damage spikes particularly well, especially if they weren't planning for it. It's also pretty difficult to recover from really bad mistakes. If your entire group is down at 10% and they're still taking constant damage, either because that's just how an encounter works or they're being stupid and standing in bad stuff, outside of Rapture, you don't have any great cooldowns to bring everyone back to full. You really have to work if you get behind on the heals, which also takes away some of the fun of Disc, because if you're having to spam bubbles and shadow mends, chances are you're not going to find much time to start DPSing again. Thankfully, you can rely on other healers and their strong throughput cooldowns in raids, but in dungeons your group is really going to have to pull the socks up unless they want to face the wrath of an unhappy disc priest. Now, as we did for the other classes, let's have a look at the Azeroth traits on offer and see if any of them stand out. We have one which increases the damage of Smite if you have Atonement on more than 3 targets, which might not always be the case, but that shouldn't be too hard to actually work towards if it ends up being worthwhile. There's one which increases the healing of Shadow Mend every time Shadow Word Pain or Purge the Wicked deals damage, up to a cap, and one which plays around with Penance. Whenever you heal with Penance, your next Smite deals extra damage, and whenever you deal damage with Penance, your next shield will absorb a little bit more. Some nice interactions between dealing damage and healing. Let's move on to the Holy spec. Holy Priests have always been the poster child of the healer role, and for a good reason. They sort of just do everything fairly well. They're not going to be a Resto Druid at the heal over time game, but they have Prayer of Mending and Renew to at least lend a hand. They might not be the strongest single target healer, but they're still going to be able to keep your tanks alive and be able to spot heal any nasty debuffs very well, and they might get beat when it comes to AoE heals by the Shamans, but that doesn't mean they won't give them a run for their money. They have everything you could ever want as a healer: single target heals, AoE heals, heal over time, a strong raid-wide throughput cooldown, and some decent utility to boot. They're a jack-of-all-trades healer. They can do a bit of everything, but they can still do that bit of everything really well. I think the way Holy Priest is set up is quite elegant. They have a strong ability for both single target and AoE healing on a fairly long cooldown, but that cooldown is reduced if you use their smaller heals. So using heal or flash heal brings your Holy Word Serenity back faster, and using your Prayer of Healing brings back Holy Word Sanctify faster. You can swap between focusing on single target and AoE at the drop of a hat, which no other class can really do quite so well. It's a pretty good feeling knowing that almost no matter what is thrown your way, you should have an answer to deal with it, and playing Holy Priest just feels reliable. You can get a feel for when your big spells will be coming back off cooldown, and as you start to learn each fight, you'll be able to pinpoint where you should be using each Holy Word. That makes Holy a great source of quick burst healing to help get everyone to a safe level right after the damage goes out. Their Mastery also provides you with some strong heal over time effects just for using your other heals. Honestly, they're just really good healers and play really smoothly. If you haven't played a healer before, Holy Priest would be a good spec to pick up first because it's relatively simple and easy to understand, but gives you enough tools so you shouldn't ever struggle too much. Thanks to the updates throughout Legion, Holy Priest is also rocking some of the most gorgeous spell animations anyone could hope for. They embody Holy Priest just so well. I think having both Disc and Holy as options to heal makes Priests very flexible, though if you're not interested in the healing specs, I guess Priest just won't ever be on your to-play list. Holy should do very well in dungeons and raids, but I feel like as you get better and better in dungeons, especially if you're playing with a specific group and really trying to push keys, I think Discipline will become more and more enticing. You can offer a little bit more playing Discipline, even more if your group isn't running around like crazy chickens, but if you want to stick to Holy, you shouldn't have too many problems. Raids are where Holy will start to shine the most though. They can fill almost any role required of a healer, and they now have Symbolous Hope as a baseline cooldown, giving all of your healers a bit of extra mana for some much needed breathing room. There's also a new raid-wide cooldown in the form of Holy Word Salvation, which is pretty crazy. It's a 12-minute cooldown, but every time you use your Serenity and Sanctify, you reduce it by 30 seconds. Apparently that could end up being around a 3 to 4 minute cooldown if you use your Holy Words properly, but it heals everyone within 40 yards, applies Renew to everyone, and gives them all 2 stacks of Prayer of Mending each. That's a lot of healing all wrapped up into one nice, neat little package. I'm excited to see if that talent ends up getting used at all. I think they're going to be a great pick for sure. The only downsides Holy Priests have is their mobility isn't all that great. That kind of goes for all priests actually. The only movement cooldown they really have is Feather, and they also don't have a very strong tank cooldown either. Guardian Angel is sort of useful in some niche situations, but it's definitely more of a panic cooldown than something you want to plan around. So they do bring some useful things to the table, but you're still going to want to mix and match your healers for the best raid comp possible. Now, how about those Azeroth powers? Well, there's a few in here that might pique your interest. How about some mana back every time Holy Fire deals damage? I feel like this one might end up being changed or reined in because that's just unlimited mana right there. And then we have one which gives Prayer of Mending a little boost, but also allows it to contribute to reducing the cooldown of Holy Word Sanctify. 2 seconds might not sound like a lot, but it's sure to add up over time. And last but not least, we have the only DPS spec available to priests, and the only non-healer spec, I guess, Shadow. All things must be in balance, even the light and the void. So let's happily run around with tentacles sprouting from our arms and legs, because we all know there's far too many paladins hanging around. We need some more Shadow priests to even the odds. Shadow has seen quite a few changes in the pre-patch, some of which could either make or break the spec for you. Right now Shadow plays a little faster than it did before outside of Void Form, and you're going to get to Void Form sooner than before, but Void Form won't get you to the same crazy state as it did previously. Instead of really long Void Forms where you do everything in your power to keep it going, you're just going to be in Void Form for less time, but be able to get it back pretty quickly. Lots of little Void Form windows instead of just a few really long ones. That means you should have Void Form available for most packs and dungeons, which should smooth out the gameplay through the entire dungeon quite a bit, which I personally enjoy. But if you loved Shadow Priest because of its damage over time playstyle, some of the other changes might put you off a little bit. Dots was so powerful in Legion, mainly due to a few interactions with artifact traits. After losing them, our dots lost a lot of power, but to balance that loss of power, the dev team put more damage into our direct damage spells instead of the dots, so that kind of tips the spec on its head, where you care more about upfront and direct damage than you do about your dots. They're still important, but they're not going to make up as much of your damage. Both Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch also had their duration reduced, and with the length of Void Form reduced, we're going to have to reapply those dots a little more often. Questions are actually being raised as to whether it's worthwhile to reapply dots during Void Form or wait until it's over. That just wouldn't have been a discussion previously. Change is interesting, and adapting to new ways to play is always the best part of new expansions in my opinion, but Shadow Priests have more or less been told that they're just not finished. The dev team ran out of time, so they'll make sure the proper class changes are introduced in patch 8.1. Does that mean Shadow is just a half-baked spec right now? That doesn't feel good at all. What if Shadow feels decent after the numbers tuning and everyone gets into the swing of things? What if patch 8.1 just throws caution to the wind and breaks Shadow Priests even more? That big question mark hanging over the spec's head is exciting, but also really worrying. Right now you can expect your Shadow Priest to do well in any encounter they can spread their dots. They might not do quite as much damage as before, and you're going to have to pay closer attention to their timers, but they still generate a good amount of extra insanity, which might not keep you in Void Form much longer, but it will get you back to Void Form faster, which allows you to go crazy way more often. Their burst AoE is actually quite surprising right now, especially if you talent for some extra firepower. I wouldn't count them out of Dungeons or Mythic Plus just yet. They're still going to be relatively okay on single target. It's not like their kit and playstyle is garbage, then damage is just a little low. That could change with tuning passes either before BFA launches or before we step foot into Uldir. I would say that Shadow Priest is going to be alright, but they could either go way up or way down when patch 8.1 hits, so just bear that in mind. Shadow's weaknesses come from their lack of mobility, which we already touched on, and their lack of cooldowns. They don't really have anything which gives them a boot up the rear to get moving, and having to move during Void Form can cripple you pretty quickly too, though not anywhere near as badly as before. As for cooldowns, well, they have Void Form, and that's sort of it in terms of DPS cooldowns, which is still really cool, but it's not going to offer you the same kind of burst as some other classes. As for Shadow's Azeroth traits, I managed to pick out a few with some cool interactions. We have one which grants critical strike rating for every stack of Void Form you have, which decays over time, so you get haste during Void Form and crit after it ends, and then we have one which causes Void Bolt to increase the damage of Mind Blast for 6 seconds, stacking up to 6 times. That gives you a nice little damage boost whenever you get into Void Form, because Void Bolt is still going to be used on cooldown. Stacking 3 of those Azeroth traits could prove to be quite deadly. Overall, I think Priests will be in a great spot if you're wanting to heal. Holy and Disc offer up different playstyles with different strengths and weaknesses. Disc is going to be top tier for Dungeons and Mythic Plus, while Holy will definitely shine bright in raid encounters. Shadow is still a bit of a question mark, but I would say it's still worth playing. Hopefully patch 8.1 doesn't mess things up for you too badly. So, are Priests worth playing? If you want to heal, for sure. If you want to DPS, maybe. If you don't like that your future is uncertain, probably not. And that's it for this video. What do you think about Priests from what you've seen so far? Are you going to play a Priest in Battle for Azeroth? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. If you want to hop on that train, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.